Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is HarrisX founder and CEO Dritan Nesho. Dritan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
There's a new Harvard-Harris poll out now showing the state of the horse race, and boy, is it close. So, Dritan, break it down. What are some of your takeaways?
Well, it's very much in line with two other polls, big national polls that have come out today, essentially showing Trump and Harris being in a dead heat, tied in the final stretch of the election for the last 60 days or so. Our poll, if you look at it together with those who are still on the fence, Trump is at 47%, Harris is at 46%, so effectively a statistical tie, and about 7% of voters are undecided. And when you push the undecideds to make a choice, then it's 50-50. So a dead heat that shows a highly, highly competitive election as we go into the final stretch.
Highly competitive might even be an understatement, Dritan. I mean, as this poll suggests, as all the other polls suggest, they are neck and neck. But break down the demographics here for us. Read the tea leaves. What are you seeing?
Well, about 20% of voters still say that they are weighing their choices for the election, and 8 in 10 say that they have fully made up their mind. When we look at the breakdown of the findings, Trump has 50% support amongst those who have made up their mind. Harris has 49% support, and only about 1% is unsure at this stage. Amongst those who are still weighing their choices, very importantly, 36% are for Trump or with Trump, 35% are with Harris, and a full 30% are uncertain at this stage. So really, this is an election that is going to come down to those voters in the middle who are still considering their options and want to learn more about the policies and where each of the candidates stand on the issues. But otherwise, besides that, both of the candidates, by and large, are retaining their voters from the last election. Harris is pulling 87% of Biden's voters from the last election, Trump about 9%, and 5 are unsure. When you look at Trump's number, he's pulling 90% of his voters from the last election, about 6% are going to Harris, and about 4% are unsure. And when you look at the third party vote from the last time, Trump is a little bit ahead, 34%, Harris 23%, and a full 43% are unsure. So by and large, each of the candidates are preserving their respective coalitions. Trump is doing better with men, 5 points ahead. Harris is doing slightly better with women, about 2 points ahead with women. Trump is doing better with white voters, about 14 points ahead there. Harris is doing better with Black or African American voters and also Hispanic voters. She's at 71% with Black voters. He's at 22%. And she's at 50% with Hispanics, and he's at 43%. So the breakouts are as you would expect, but it shows that there's many ways to victory, but each of those ways are limited in how much that they can contribute to each of the candidates. So really, it's about those independent voters in the middle, those undecided voters, and how many of them across all these different demographics each of the candidates can capture via the debates that they'll be planning to have, and then also in the final push before the election.
That's a really interesting way to frame it, that there are many ways to victory. Let's talk about gender being one of those ways. Today, the Harris campaign was in North Carolina, and they spent a good part of a rally today focusing on abortion. How are they doing specifically with the women vote, and can they be grabbing more? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, as we just mentioned, Harris is only about 2 points ahead with women voters over Trump. So it's very, very tight. And Trump seems to have closed the gap both with women voters and actually when it comes to suburban voters he's winning 48% of suburban voters, she's winning 45%, and about 7% are still unsure. Similar number of unsure also for female voters across the country. About 8% are unsure. I'm not sure that this is the best path forward for the Harris campaign, especially for picking up those voters in the middle. But it's certainly, they're playing defense, right? They're trying to preserve the lead that they have with women voters, and they're anchoring on the one issue that matters a lot to women voters, which is their right over their bodies, their abortion-related rights. Overall, though, the number one most important issue for voters is still inflation. When we asked in our Harvard Harris poll, which of the following issues is most important to you personally, 46% said inflation. That's 51% of Republican voters and 51% of independent voters within that group, and 36% of Democratic voters. The number two issue was immigration. Overall, 16% of voters say that immigration was the top issue. So a full 30 points difference between inflation and immigration. And again, immigration, Republican voters are more concerned with immigration at 27%. Independent voters are in line with overall voters at 15%. Democrats are not as focused on it at only 5%. And then the third issue is abortion, 12%. So again, inflation 46%, immigration 16%, abortion 12%. And again, abortion is the number one issue for 19% of Democrats, 6% of Republicans, and about 10% of independents. So it's not the number one issue. It's a top three issue, but it's not the number one issue for voters. Voters are still overwhelmingly concerned about inflation, about their economic prospects, and they're still in a fairly dour mood when it comes to the economy and their personal finances as they head towards the ballot box.
Talk to us about those numbers, because this poll does suggest people aren't feeling very positively about the economy. Inflation is massively ahead of immigration in this poll. And when Biden was still in the race, inflation and the economy was a weak point for him. So now when voters think of Kamala Harris, do they pin Bidenomics and those sour feelings that they have towards that on her?
That's a great question. It's important to note that when we ask voters, is Harris aligned with Biden politically, or is she to his left or to his right? 50% say largely aligned, about 36% say to the left of Biden, and 14% say to the right of Biden. More importantly, when you follow that question with, will Harris continue the Biden administration policies on issues like taxes, inflation, immigration, and energy, or will she change direction? 63% of all voters, including 62% of Democrats, 67% of Republicans, and 59% of independents, say that she will continue Biden's policies. So in many ways, they view Harris as a continuity rather than a break with the policies of the Biden administration. And as you said, they're in a fairly pessimistic mood around the economy. 62% say that the economy is weak, so close to two-thirds. 63% say that the direction of the economy is off on the wrong track. And almost half of all voters, 48%, say that their personal finances are getting worse rather than improving. So the perceptions around the economy are still overwhelmingly negative. And Trump benefits from this because he's seen as the one who understands the economy the best. When we asked, who understands the economy the best, 49% say Trump, 42% say Harris, and 9% are unsure. So Trump is about 7 points ahead when it comes to understanding the economy, and he's stronger, generally speaking, on economic issues. So this is a weak spot for the Harris campaign, and the more that they can talk about the economy in detail and provide a vision for the economy, the better off they'll be over the course of the next 60 days.
Do you think that this could be a make or break issue for the Harris campaign when it comes to winning or losing? Because when it comes to those battleground states, when it comes to people really caring about those kitchen table issues, when they think about the economy under Trump versus Harris, and Trump is pulling with these numbers, I mean, is this how detrimental is this to the Harris campaign?
Well, it's an interesting breakdown in the data, or there's an interesting breakdown in the data because each of the candidates has their strength, both in terms of their character and what they bring to the table, and in terms of their issues. And I'm going to take a moment to break it down for our audience because this is a very important element to answering your question. So Harris is seen as having a better temperament than Trump. 48% say she has a better temperament. 37% say Trump has a better temperament. About 15% are undecided. Um, she Voters say slightly that she represents change more than Trump, but this is driven largely by Democrats and independents who are very dissatisfied with Biden as the Democratic nominee. And again, she has a slight edge on having the right values, 47% to 41%, with 13% undecided. So +6 on having the right values, and +6 on caring about people like me, right? So by and large, she has appeal with voters, and they generally see her as being slightly more trustworthy, 44% to 39% for Trump, and slightly more honest, 43% to 37% for Trump. Now, where it flips over is who has the experience to be president. Trump wins by 10 points. 50% say Trump, 40% say Harris, 10% undecided. Who understands the economy? Trump is up by 7 points, 49% to 42% for Harris, with 9% undecided. And the numbers are almost exactly the same for the question of who will get things done. Trump 49, Harris 42, 10% undecided. Who understands foreign policy? Again, Trump is ahead, 47% for Trump, 40% for Harris, 13% being undecided. And then Trump is also seen as being a fighter and someone who will push through whatever he's promising for his voters in the election. 50% say he's a fighter, 43% view Harris more as a fighter, and about 7% are ahead. So each of them have their relative strengths and weaknesses on the character side, and the picture carries over when it comes to the issues as well. So Harris is seen as being stronger on abortion, racial equality, education, healthcare, and climate change. She's roughly ahead, double digits compared to Trump. But Trump is ahead when it comes to the economy, 7 points ahead, inflation, 8 points ahead, fiscal responsibility, 5 points ahead, immigration, 12 points ahead, and then on a whole array of defense and foreign policy issues from combating terrorism to Israel Hamas war and beyond. And what's interesting is that voters in general feel that they know enough where Kamala Harris stands on the issues. 70% say I know enough, and 30% say need to know more. And about 83% say they know enough about Trump, and 17% say they need to know more. So, given all of this information, and given that each of the candidates has strengths, relative strengths within their character, relative strengths within their issues, and voters generally feel that they know enough about them, what that means is that what will really give the candidates traction over the next 30 to 60 days is a vision for the future, concrete solutions that cause a buzz amongst voters, and they can really anchor on a plan for solving one of the issues that matter to them most. But it could also come down to the debates tomorrow night or subsequent debates, because voters really are trying to find which candidate has the edge, right? And which of them can give them a better path forward and a better deal for the next 4 years. So a very much a split picture. Each of the candidates has relative strengths, and it's an election where a 23rd hour surprise or a 23rd hour policy initiative that really gives traction to the candidate with voters can make a big difference.
I do want to ask you about this number that I saw that was really interesting to me, and that was the crossover from parties. So Donald Trump is getting 7% of Democrats. Who are these Democrats that are switching over party lines and voting for Donald Trump?
They're Democrats that are unhappy with their economic circumstances and to a smaller extent with crime related issues. And again, this is not unusual in an election to have some some voters from each of the party break ranks. Also, Trump is not a conventional Republican. He's not a conservative Republican. He comes from a centrist background historically, so he's had pull with Democratic voters, which is roughly equivalent to what we're seeing right now.
And if 30% of voters say they need to know more about Kamala Harris, 17% of voters say they need to know more about Donald Trump, just how important is this debate tomorrow? Do you think it's make or break in this election?
It could be. It could be because, and especially for Kamala Harris, because it's clear at this stage that the honeymoon is over, at least with voters. And one of the most important questions that we asked in this poll is, do you believe that Kamala Harris is making her beliefs clear, or is she hiding her real beliefs? 52% said she's making her beliefs clear, and 48% said she's hiding her beliefs. There's strong partisan split in how this question was answered, but independents are split smack dab in the middle, 50-50 on this particular question. If she doesn't go deep into the issues, if she doesn't speak in a genuine way that builds her up and builds her case up, then we could see a flip in the dynamic of the election and a flip in the polls. Conversely, when you look at Trump, 63% say that he is making his beliefs clear, and only 37% say that he's hiding his beliefs. And so really, Trump's test tomorrow will be about how he handles himself and he comports himself in the debate. If he comes out too strong against Kamala Harris, that can backfire on him. If he is more scripted, ironically, and sticks to the policy issues, he may actually score some points in the debate and start changing the dynamic of the polls.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for next. We all know how the last debate changed everything about this race. So I'm sure you and I will have plenty of conversations before and after. Dritan, Nesho, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. And for the viewers, if they want to look at the full survey, it's out there at harvardharrispoll.com.